Hello there, and welcome. I'm so glad you found your way here. Maybe your day has been long, or maybe your mind is the kind that likes to wander at night, through old ruins, forgotten places, and questions that do not need quick answers. Either way, tonight's journey is for you. You have nothing to solve, nothing to remember, nothing to prove. You can simply rest, listen, and let the ancient world pass by slowly, one strange little mystery at a time. So let your shoulders loosen. Let your breathing become slower. Let the room around you grow still, as if the noise of the day is being covered gently by desert sand, soft rain, and the quiet shadow of old stone. Because tonight, we are drifting through 100 strange facts about ancient mysteries, a world of buried cities, unread scripts, enormous stones, desert drawings, sealed tombs, forgotten machines, sacred caves, sunken ruins, and stories that have survived for thousands of years. But beneath the dust and silence of the ancient world, some questions still remain. How did people move stones so large they still seem almost impossible? Why did they draw enormous shapes across empty deserts? What voices are hidden inside scripts we still cannot read? Why were some cities abandoned, some tombs sealed, and some stories carried from one generation to the next long after their original meaning had faded? We'll wander gently from Göbekli Tepe to the Great Pyramid, from the Nazca Lines to the Antikythera mechanism, from cave walls lit by firelight to stone circles aligned with the sky. We'll visit lost cities, ancient calendars, strange artifacts, forgotten roads, silent tombs, and myths that may still hold small echoes of real events. Some mysteries tonight have possible explanations. Some are partly understood. Some are probably less impossible than they first appear. And some remain interesting not because they prove anything supernatural, but because they show how old, patient, symbolic, and imaginative human beings have always been. There is no need to stay alert for all of it. You can drift in and out. Each fact is its own little doorway. If you miss one, another will arrive soon enough, quietly waiting for you. And just before we begin, if these calm and curious journeys help you unwind, consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It helps other tired and curious minds find their way here too, one quiet night at a time. Now, let's begin. Across the ancient world, there are places that seem to hold questions rather than answers. A stone circle on an open plain, a buried city beneath the dust, a sealed tomb, a desert drawing too large to understand from the ground, a symbol carved into clay by someone whose language has fallen silent. These places are not mysterious because ancient people were impossible to understand. They are mysterious because they were human. They built, buried, carved, measured, watched the sky, and tried to leave meaning behind in forms that could outlive them. Some of these mysteries have explanations, some only have fragments, and between the evidence and the silence, the ancient world still feels quietly alive. Long before the pyramids or Stonehenge, people gathered at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey. There, more than 11,000 years ago, they raised large stone pillars carved with animals, including foxes, snakes, birds, and wild boar. What makes Göbekli Tepe so fascinating is that it seems to come from a time before farming had fully changed human life. For years, people imagined temples appearing only after villages and cities became settled. But this site suggests something more complicated. Maybe ritual, memory, and shared belief helped bring people together before civilization looked the way we expect. The stones do not tell us exactly what happened there, but they do suggest that wonder is older than cities. The Great Pyramid of Giza is not mysterious because we need wild explanations for it. It is mysterious because the real explanation is already astonishing. Thousands of people organized the cutting, moving, lifting, and placing of millions of stone blocks with tools far simpler than ours. They used planning, labor, ramps, sledges, boats, ropes, measurement, and time. And somehow, more than 4,000 years later, the pyramid still stands. Its size can make the mind go quiet, not because it proves impossible technology, but because it shows what human patience can become when a whole society gives itself to one enormous purpose. A mountain made by hands, still watching the desert. More than 2,000 years ago, a strange bronze device sank with a ship near the Greek island of Antikythera. When it was found, it looked like a corroded lump of metal. But inside were gears. The Antikythera mechanism could model movements of the sun, the moon, and cycles of time with remarkable complexity. It was not magic. It was mathematics shaped into machinery. That is what makes it so haunting. It reminds us that the ancient world was not simple or primitive. It was full of careful observers, builders, and thinkers, many of whose inventions have vanished. What survived was only a fragment. But even a fragment can make the past feel suddenly close. In the dry desert of southern Peru, the Nazca lines stretch across the earth in enormous shapes. From the ground, many of them look like simple paths or pale marks in the soil. From above, they become animals, lines, spirals, and geometric forms. A hummingbird, a spider, a monkey. Long straight lines crossing the desert. They were made by removing darker surface stones and revealing lighter earth beneath. The mystery is not only how people plan such large designs, because ropes, stakes, and careful measuring may explain much of that. The deeper question is why. Were they ritual paths, offerings, water symbols, or images for the gods? No single answer has settled everything, so they remain there, open to the sky. In the dry desert of southern Peru, the Nazca lines stretch across the earth in enormous shapes. From the ground, many of them look like simple paths or pale marks in the soil. From above, they become animals, lines, spirals, and geometric forms. A hummingbird, a spider, a monkey, long straight lines crossing the desert. They were made by removing darker surface stones and revealing lighter earth beneath. The mystery is not only how people planned such large designs, because ropes, stakes, and careful measuring may explain much of that. The deeper question is why. Were they ritual paths, offerings, water symbols, or images for the gods? No single answer has settled everything. So they remain there, open to the sky, their pale lines resting quietly in the desert. And far away in another ancient landscape, another kind of mystery was left behind. Not drawn across the earth, but pressed into seals, built into streets, and hidden inside a language we still cannot read. The Indus Valley civilization left behind cities that feel strangely close to us. At places like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, there were straight streets, brick houses, wells, drains, workshops, and signs of careful planning. But the people who lived there also left behind small seals marked with symbols we still cannot confidently read. That silence changes everything. We can study their buildings. We can trace their trade. We can see how carefully they managed water and city life. But when we look at their writing, the voice fades. We do not know whether the signs record names, goods, rituals, titles, or ordinary messages. The marks remain clear, but the people behind them still speak softly, just beyond our hearing. And from those unread symbols, we can drift toward another kind of silence. Not a written silence, but a silence made of stone. Stonehenge is often imagined as one finished monument, standing alone on the open plain. But it was built and changed over many centuries. Before the famous stones stood there, the landscape already held earthworks, burials, wooden posts, and older traces of human activity. That makes Stonehenge less like a single object and more like a long memory. Generations returned to the same place, adding meaning as the years passed. Some parts seem connected to the movements of the sun. Others may be tied to burial, gathering, ancestry, or ceremony. No single explanation holds everything. And maybe that is why it still feels powerful. It was not only built, it was returned to again and again. Stonehenge is only one part of a much wider human story. Across the ancient world, people moved stones so large that even now they make the imagination pause. At Baalbek, in Lebanon, some blocks weigh hundreds of tons. In Egypt, obelisks were carved from single pieces of granite. On Easter Island, the Moai were transported across rough volcanic land. The mystery is not simply how ancient people moved stone. With ropes, sledges, ramps, levers, boats, and enough time, heavy things can move. The deeper mystery is why they chose such difficult work. A huge stone does not move because one person is strong. It moves because many people agree that it matters. And when those stones still stand, they carry both weight and belief. But even the strongest stones do not keep every city alive forever. Some ancient cities did not vanish in a single night. They faded slowly. A road became less important. A canal filled with silt. A drought lasted too long. A trade route shifted. Families left one by one, while walls and temples stayed behind. We often call these places lost cities, as if everyone simply disappeared. But the truth is usually quieter. People adapted, moved, mixed with others, or built new lives somewhere else. The ruins are only the part that remained still. That is why abandoned cities feel so strange. They look like endings. But often they are only pauses in a much longer human story, where life continued beyond the horizon. And when places fade, stories sometimes remain. Some of the oldest myths may carry echoes of real events, not perfect records, not exact history, but memories changed by time. A great flood may begin with a river disaster. A fire in the sky may begin with a comet or meteor. A strange bone found in the ground may become a giant, a dragon, or a monster from an earlier age. Ancient people did not have modern science, but they watched the world carefully. They remembered what frightened them. They gave shape to what they could not explain. And as stories passed from one generation to the next, the details changed while the feeling remained. Sometimes a myth is not a map of what happened. Sometimes it is the shadow of what people could never forget. From old stories that carried memory forward, we can move back into stone again. Because some ancient mysteries do not survive as words. They survive as landscapes. In western France, near the coast of Brittany, thousands of standing stones stretch across the fields of Karnak. At first, they may seem almost plain, just stones standing in rows, but the longer you imagine them, the stranger they become. They were placed there thousands of years ago, long before the Roman Empire, long before the castles and churches that would later rise across Europe. No one knows exactly why so many stones were raised in that place. They may have marked sacred paths, gathering spaces, ancestors, seasons, or something we no longer have the right words for. And so Karnak remains quiet, a landscape arranged by human hands, still waiting beneath the sky. Some ancient stones may have helped people watch the year move slowly around them. Before printed calendars, before clocks, and before modern astronomy, the horizon itself could become a kind of guide. People watched where the sun rose and where it set. They noticed how its path changed with the seasons, and how certain days seemed to bring the light back to the same place again. At some monuments, a doorway, passage, or stone alignment appears to catch the sun at a special moment of the year. To us, this can feel like science. To ancient people, it may also have been ritual, memory, farming, death, renewal, or devotion. The sky was not separate from life. It was part of it. And when stone was placed in line with the sun, time itself became something you could enter. One of the most beautiful examples is Newgrange in Ireland. It is a passage tomb more than 5,000 years old, older than both Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid. From the outside, it looks like a great rounded mound resting in the landscape. But inside, a narrow passage leads into a dark chamber. For most of the year, that chamber remains hidden from direct sunlight. Then, around the winter solstice, the rising sun enters through a small opening above the doorway and travels down the passage. For a short time, the darkness inside is touched by light. No one knows every belief connected to that moment, but the image is still powerful. In the deepest part of winter, ancient builders made a place where the sun could return. Far away from Ireland, on Easter Island, another kind of stone mystery looks out across the land. The Moai are often remembered as giant heads, but many of them have bodies as well. Some were buried up to their shoulders by soil and time, making only their long faces visible. When archaeologists studied them more closely, they found torsos, hands, carved backs, and details that made them feel less like simple monuments and more like full presences. The Moai were likely connected to ancestors, authority, and memory. Many stood with their backs toward the sea and their faces toward the villages. That detail changes the feeling of them. They were not only looking outward into distance, they were watching over the living, and even now, their calm stone faces seem to hold a patient kind of attention. For a long time, people wondered how the Moai were moved across Easter Island. Some were carved from volcanic stone and transported from the quarry to places where they would stand. Moving such heavy figures would have required planning, teamwork, and care. One theory suggests that some Moai may have been moved upright, rocked gently from side to side with ropes, so they shifted forward little by little, almost as if they were walking. That idea is especially interesting because local traditions speak of statues that walked to their places. It does not mean the stones moved by magic. It may mean that memory preserved the method in poetic form. A statue swaying forward. A group pulling in rhythm. A figure of stone moving slowly across the island. And for a moment, the past feels almost alive. At Baalbek, in modern Lebanon, some ancient stones are so large that they almost seem to resist belief. The sanctuary there was built and rebuilt over many centuries, but the most famous mystery is found in the foundation of the Roman temple platform. 3 enormous blocks, often called the trilithon, each weigh hundreds of tons. Nearby, in an old quarry, even larger stones still lie unfinished, partly attached to the earth. Ancient people clearly knew how to move heavy stone. That part is not impossible. the quieter mystery is why they chose such difficult blocks in the first place. Maybe it was strength, maybe prestige, maybe sacred ambition, or maybe the builders wanted the place itself to feel heavier than ordinary life. Whatever the reason, the stones remain there, silent and immense, with all their weight pressed into history. Some monuments impress us because they were completed. Others are powerful because they were abandoned halfway through. In southern Egypt, near Aswan, an unfinished obelisk still lies in the ancient quarry. It was never raised toward the sky, never carried to a temple, and never polished into its final sacred form. Instead, it remains partly carved from the bedrock. A finished monument can hide the process that made it, but this one reveals the work. You can still see where ancient workers cut channels into the granite, slowly shaping an enormous piece of stone out of the earth. The obelisk was probably abandoned because a crack appeared. One flaw was enough to stop the whole project. And there is something quietly human in that. All the planning, all the effort, all the ambition paused by a single line through the stone. The unfinished obelisk never stood, but it still speaks. Ancient Egyptian obelisks were carved from single pieces of stone. That detail is simple, but the reality behind it is enormous. A tall needle of granite had to be cut from a quarry, shaped carefully, moved without breaking, and raised upright with no modern cranes or engines. Obelisks were connected with the sun. They stood at temple entrances, pointing upward, catching the light and linking earth, kingship, gods, and sky. There are practical explanations for how they were moved. Ropes, sledges, ramps, boats, skilled workers, and long experience all mattered. But knowing the tools does not remove the wonder. It only changes where the wonder lives. Not in magic, but in the hands of workers, the rhythm of effort, and the morning when a stone taken from the earth finally stood upright in the light. A monument does not always have one beginning and one ending. Some ancient places changed slowly, as generations returned to landscapes that were already important. A stone could be raised near an older marker. A burial could be placed close to a remembered place. An earthwork could be reshaped by people who inherited the site, but understood it in a new way. That is easy to forget when we see ruins today. We often imagine one builder, one purpose, one moment. But many ancient monuments were more like conversations across time. One generation built, another altered, another remembered, and another came back because the place still mattered. That may be why some ruins feel quietly alive. They were not only built from stone and earth, they were built from return. The ancient world was not only concerned with building high or building large. It was also concerned with placing things exactly where they mattered. A tomb facing sunrise creates a different feeling from one hidden in shadow. A temple beside a river belongs to a different world than one placed high above a valley. A stone circle on open ground can make the whole horizon feel included in its design. For many ancient people, landscape was not background. It was part of the meaning. The sky, water, hills, paths, seasons, and directions could all become part of the monument itself. And maybe that is why some ruins still feel powerful even when little remains. The walls may be broken, the original voices may be gone, but the place still holds its shape in the world. The wind still moves over it, the sun still rises, and the land still seems to remember that someone chose it for a reason. Petra does not feel like a city that was simply built. It feels like a city that was revealed from the stone. In the desert of modern Jordan, the Nabateans carved tombs, temples, and grand facades directly into rose-colored cliffs. The rock itself became architecture, glowing differently as the light changed through the day. Petra was not just beautiful, it was also practical. It sat along important trade routes where incense, spices, textiles, and other goods moved between distant worlds. That combination makes it feel especially strange. A city of commerce carved like a dream into the desert. Its most famous building, the Treasury, still appears suddenly at the end of a narrow canyon, as if the ancient world is opening a door. And in the quiet stone, trade becomes memory. Angkor was not only a temple complex, it was once part of an enormous living city. In Cambodia, the temples of Angkor rise from a landscape shaped by water, roads, reservoirs, canals, houses, fields, and sacred design. The stone temples are what survive most clearly, but they were only the visible heart of something much larger. At its height, Angkor may have been one of the great urban landscapes of the pre-modern world. Its mystery is not only in the faces carved into towers or the roots that now curl around fallen walls. It is in the scale of the whole system. People shaped land and water together, trying to hold a city in balance with the seasons. And when the balance changed, the city changed with it. What looks like a jungle ruin was once a carefully ordered world. Some places are called lost because the forest grows over them. But the people were not simply swallowed by trees. The Maya cities of Central America are often described as vanished, but that word can be misleading. Great cities like Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque, and Copan rose with temples, courts, inscriptions, art, astronomy, and complex political life. Some of those cities declined over time, affected by drought, conflict, changing power, exhausted resources, and shifting trade. But the Maya did not disappear. Their descendants are still here, with living languages, traditions, and communities. That truth makes the ruins feel different. They are not the remains of a people who vanished from the earth. They are the stone memories of cities that changed, while human life continued beyond them. High in the Andes, Machu Picchu rests between mountains and mist. It was built by the Inca in a place that feels almost suspended between earth and sky. Terraces step down the slopes, stone walls fit tightly together, and paths move through temples, rooms, and open spaces shaped by the mountain itself. For a long time, Machu Picchu was not widely known outside the region. That helped to give it the feeling of a hidden city, even though local people knew of its existence. Its mystery is not that it was impossible to build. The Inca were extraordinary engineers. The mystery is how naturally it seems to belong where it stands. The stone, the terraces, the peaks, and the clouds all seem to form one quiet design, as if the city was not placed on the mountain, but drawn out of it. The Inca world stretched across mountains, deserts, valleys, and coastlines, and yet it held together without a writing system like the alphabetic scripts many people know today. Instead, the Inca used memory, administration, roads, messengers, and knotted cords called quipu. These cords could record numbers, and some researchers believe they may have carried more complex information as well. That makes them one of the quiet mysteries of ancient communication. A quipu does not speak to us like a carved inscription. It hangs in silence, made of fiber, knots, colors, spacing, and pattern. To the people trained to read it, it may have been clear. To us, much of it remains uncertain, and a chord becomes something more than a chord, a memory system, a record. A message tied carefully into silence, A message tied carefully into silence can feel strangely close to another silence, pressed not into cord, but into tiny seals of stone. The Indus script remains one of archaeology's great unanswered questions. Thousands of short inscriptions have been found, often on seals, pottery, tablets, and small objects from the Indus Valley civilization. The signs are neat and deliberate, sometimes placed beside animals or human-like figures, as if they once carried meaning clearly understood by the people who made them. But today, there is no agreed full decipherment. The texts are usually short, and there is no known bilingual key like the Rosetta Stone. So the symbols remain visible, but unread. Not lost to the eye, only lost to understanding. And that same kind of silence once lived on the island of Crete. The Minoans left behind a writing system now called Linear A, carved and written on tablets, vessels, and ritual objects. It came before Linear B, the script later used to write an early form of Greek. Linear B was eventually deciphered, which gave scholars a living doorway into part of the ancient Aegean world. But Linear A has remained mostly closed. The signs can be studied. Some sounds may be guessed. Patterns can be compared. And still, the language behind it has not fully stepped into the light. That is what makes Linear A so quietly haunting. It is not completely invisible. It stands near a language we can read, almost within reach, yet still turned slightly away. Sometimes a mystery survives not because there is too little to see, but because the thing we see refuses to explain itself. The Phaistos disc is a small clay object from Crete, covered on both sides with symbols arranged in a spiral. They were not simply scratched by hand. They appear to have been stamped into the clay one by one, with signs showing figures, tools, plants, animals, and shapes whose meanings remain uncertain. The disc has fascinated researchers for more than a century. Some think it may contain a hymn, a ritual text, a calendar, a game, or something else entirely. But without more examples like it, certainty is difficult. It remains a spiral of ancient intention, a message that turns inward, slowly and never quite arrives. A spiral can draw the eye in, but across the world, on Easter Island, another set of marks seems to move almost like a path. Rongorongo is the name given to mysterious glyphs carved into wooden tablets from Rapa Nui. The signs often appear in flowing lines, with small human, animal, and geometric forms arranged in a distinctive pattern. Some researchers believe Rongorongo may be a true writing system. Others think it may be proto-writing, a memory aid, a ritual notation, or something that worked together with spoken knowledge. The difficulty is that the tradition was disrupted, and the people who fully understood the signs were no longer able to pass that knowledge forward. So the marks remain, not merely decorative, not clearly readable, a wooden memory waiting in a language of shapes. And these unread signs remind us to be careful. Not every ancient mark is a language. A symbol can mean many things without being writing in the way we usually imagine. It might show ownership, count goods, mark a ritual, decorate an object, identify a family, or help someone remember a spoken story. Modern eyes often want every sign to become a sentence. But ancient meaning was not always stored in sentences. It could live in pattern, position, repetition, color, gesture, and use. A mark on a pot may not speak like a book, but it may still have mattered deeply to the person who made it. So the mystery is not always, what does this say? Sometimes the better question is softer. What did this help someone remember? Sometimes the answer comes not from one mark alone, but from the same message repeated in more than one language. That is what made the Rosetta Stone so important. Found in Egypt in 1799, it carried a decree written in 3 scripts: hieroglyphic, Demotic, and Ancient Greek. Because scholars could read Greek, they slowly began to compare the texts and unlock the older Egyptian writing that had been silent for centuries. It was not an instant miracle. It took careful work, pattern by pattern, name by name, sign by sign. But eventually, the stone became a key, a single broken slab that helped open a whole civilization's voice. And once that voice returned, the pictures on Egyptian walls began to speak in ways people had forgotten. Hieroglyphs can look at first like a language made only of images. Birds, eyes, reeds, hands, snakes, seated figures, and sacred objects line the walls of temples and tombs. But they were not just pictures. They could represent sounds. They could stand for ideas. They could name objects, mark titles, honor gods, and preserve words meant to last beyond ordinary life. A single sign might work in more than one way, depending on where it appeared and how it was used. That is part of what makes hieroglyphs so beautiful. They belong partly to language, partly to art, and partly to ritual. They do not only tell us what someone wrote, they show us how writing itself could become sacred. And sometimes, what writing saves most clearly is a name. A king's name carved in a cartouche, a worker's name scratched near a tomb, a priest, a queen, a child, a person otherwise almost completely gone. Ancient names survive in stone long after the voices that spoke them have disappeared. Kingdoms fall, houses vanish, languages change, and families dissolve into time. But a carved name can remain where a hand once placed it. There is something very small and very moving in that. History often remembers wars, rulers, temples, and dates. But a name is different. A name suggests a life. Someone was known by it. Someone answered to it. Someone may have hoped it would not be forgotten. Stone is cold, but it can carry a human trace with surprising tenderness. And a name is only one piece of what disappears when a language is lost. A lost language is not just a missing dictionary. It is a missing world of jokes, prayers, warnings, promises, arguments, songs, market talk, family names, and ordinary thoughts spoken at the end of ordinary days. When a language falls silent, we lose more than grammar. We lose the way a people shaped reality with sound. We lose what they found beautiful, what they feared, what they repeated to children, what they whispered to the dead, and what they said when no one important was listening. Even when artifacts survive, the inner weather of a culture can become harder to feel. A pot can remain. A wall can remain. A symbol can remain. But without the language, much of the warmth has gone out of the room. That is why every unread script feels like a sleeping voice. The signs are still there, pressed into clay, carved into stone, painted on walls, scratched onto wood, or stamped into objects small enough to fit in a hand. We can measure them, photograph them, compare them, count them, and arrange them into careful charts. But the breath behind them is missing. We do not hear the pause in a sentence, the rhythm of a prayer, the tone of a warning, or the softness of a name spoken by someone who loved it. Maybe one day some of these scripts will open. Maybe some never will. For now, they rest between seeing and understanding. Visible, patient, and quiet. Like words waiting in their sleep. But sometimes, ancient knowledge sleeps inside a machine. The Antikythera mechanism, found in a shipwreck near a Greek island, is one of the most remarkable objects from the ancient world. At first, it looked like a corroded lump of bronze, damaged by salt water and time. But inside were gears. Small wheels, carefully arranged, once worked together to model cycles of the sun, the moon, eclipses, and perhaps the planets. It was not magic. It was observation, mathematics, and craftsmanship turned into motion. What makes it feel so strange is not that ancient people watched the sky, but that someone built a little mechanical universe to follow it. Long before gears turned beneath the sea, people were already turning their eyes upward. In ancient Babylon, astronomers watched the sky with extraordinary patience. Night after night, generation after generation, they recorded the movements of the moon, planets, stars, and eclipses on clay tablets. They noticed patterns not because they had telescopes, but because they had time, discipline, and a deep need to understand the heavens. Their records were practical and symbolic. The sky could guide calendars, rituals, kingship, omens, and decisions on Earth. A planet returning to the same place was not just a point of light. It was part of a repeating order. And in those long records, the night sky became something that could be remembered. When a pattern is watched long enough, it can begin to reveal the future. Ancient people could sometimes predict eclipses before they understood them in the modern scientific sense. They did not need to know about gravity in the way we do now, or the full geometry of the Earth, Moon, and Sun. What they needed was careful observation across long stretches of time. If an eclipse happened and another came after a certain rhythm, that rhythm could be recorded. Slowly, sky watching became expectation. To us, prediction can feel like proof of understanding. But the ancient world shows something softer. You can know that something will happen before you fully know why. And maybe that was enough to make the heavens feel both orderly and mysterious. Order and mystery also shaped the way the Maya thought about time. The Maya tracked cycles with extraordinary seriousness, using calendars that connected days, rituals, rulers, agriculture, memory, and cosmic meaning. Their calendar systems were not only tools for counting. They helped place human life inside repeating patterns larger than any one person. A day could carry a sacred quality. A ruler's action could be tied to a meaningful date. A ceremony could echo an earlier moment in deep time. This was not time as an empty line moving forward. It was time as rhythm, time as return, time as something woven through gods, kings, seasons, and stories. And when a civilization measures time so carefully, it leaves behind more than numbers. It leaves behind a way of feeling the universe move. The sky did not only live in calendars, it also entered stone. In ancient Egypt, stars, sunlight, directions, and sacred geography shaped the way some monuments were designed. A temple might face a meaningful point on the horizon. A tomb might connect symbolically with the journey of the sun. Certain pyramids and sacred spaces were aligned with striking care, turning architecture into a conversation between earth and sky. Not every alignment means the same thing, and not every claim about ancient astronomy is certain. But it is clear that the heavens mattered deeply. The sky was not decoration above the world. It was part of religion, kingship, death, rebirth, and order. And when Egyptian builders placed stone beneath the stars, they were not only making monuments, they were giving the cosmos a doorway into the earth. If the sky could enter stone, time could enter water. Long before clocks ticked on walls or glowed beside beds, some ancient people measured time by watching liquid slowly fall. Water clocks were used in several ancient cultures, including Egypt, Greece, and elsewhere, because they could work even when the sun was gone. A bowl might drain through a small opening. A vessel might fill little by little. The changing level of water became a quiet way to measure passing moments. There is something gentle about that idea. Time not as a bell or a number or a machine, but as darkness, patience, and dripping water. A night measured not by noise but by a slow, lowering surface in a silent room. When daylight returned, time could be seen in shadow. Sundials turned the moving sun into a measurement, using a raised piece of stone or metal to cast a shadow across marked lines. As the day passed, the shadow shifted. Morning stretched one way. Midday shortened it. Evening pulled it long again. It was a simple idea, but also a beautiful one. The sun became a kind of hand, moving across stone without touch. Of course, sundials depended on clear skies, careful placement, and local conditions. They were not perfect in the way modern clocks are, but they show how closely ancient people watched ordinary things. A shadow was not just shade, it was information, a quiet sign that the day was turning. And while some ancient inventions measured time, others were built to endure it. Roman concrete is one of those materials that still surprises modern researchers. Some Roman structures, especially in marine environments, survived for thousands of years while waves, salt, and weather worked against them. The secret was not one single ingredient, but a mixture of volcanic ash, lime, stone, and chemical reactions that could make the material stronger over time in certain conditions. To the Romans, this was practical knowledge. Harbors, walls, baths, bridges, and buildings needed materials that could last. But to us, the survival feels almost mysterious, a substance poured by ancient hands still holding against the sea. Not untouched, not eternal, but stubbornly present, as if the old world learned in its own way how to harden itself against time. Durability was one kind of invention. Movement was another. Hero of Alexandria, a Greek engineer and writer from the 1st century, described devices that seem almost playful in their curiosity. He wrote about mechanisms using steam, air pressure, water, weights, and hidden motion. Temple doors could appear to open by themselves. Fountains could behave in surprising ways. Small automata could move as if animated by invisible forces. These devices were not modern machines in the industrial sense. They were experiments, demonstrations, entertainments, and sacred effects. But they show something important. Ancient people were not only builders of stone monuments and temples, they were also thinkers of pressure, motion, heat, and illusion. They wondered what hidden forces could do, and sometimes they made those forces perform quietly before human eyes. That quiet performance changes how the ancient world feels. It was not modern, but it was inventive, not industrial, but observant, not filled with engines and electricity, but full of people testing materials, watching the sky, shaping water, guiding shadows, mixing concrete, and turning gears. The ancient world was not simple. It was practical, symbolic, patient, and experimental all at once. Some knowledge was written down. Some was passed from hand to hand. Some was built into roads, walls, clocks, ships, temples, and tools. And much of it disappeared when workshops closed, libraries burned, languages changed, or ordinary techniques stopped being taught. What survives is uneven. A gear here, a formula there, a wall still standing, a broken device. Enough to remind us that invention is not only a modern habit, it is one of the older rhythms of being human. Some things survive because they are strong. Others survive because they are forgotten. Tutankhamun's tomb is one of the most famous discoveries in archaeology, not because it was the grandest royal tomb ever built, but because so much of it remained sealed when it was found in 1922. Many royal tombs in Egypt had been robbed long before modern archaeologists arrived. But Tutankhamun's resting place was smaller, partly hidden, and eventually covered by later activity in the Valley of the Kings. Chance protected what power could not. Gold, furniture, chariots, shrines, and ordinary objects waited in darkness for more than 3,000 years. Its mystery is not only royal wealth, it is the strange way forgetting can become a kind of protection. The Valley of the Kings was chosen for secrecy. Instead of building pyramids that rose visibly from the desert, New Kingdom pharaohs were buried in hidden tombs cut into the cliffs and valleys west of the Nile. The idea was simple enough. A tomb that could not be easily seen might be harder to disturb, but secrecy did not always work. Many tombs were robbed in antiquity, sometimes not long after they were sealed. The treasures inside were too tempting, and the location of a royal burial could rarely remain unknown forever. That gives the valley a quiet tension. It was built for eternity, but surrounded by danger. Painted chambers, sealed corridors, sacred texts, and hidden doors all tried to guard the dead. Yet time kept finding a way in. Far from Egypt, another ruler tried to carry power beyond death on an even larger scale. In China, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, remains largely unopened. The burial complex is enormous, surrounded by archaeology, legend, and caution. Ancient texts describe rivers of mercury inside the tomb, and modern testing has found unusually high mercury levels in the surrounding soil, though the exact interior remains unknown. That uncertainty is part of why the central tomb has not been fully excavated. Opening it could damage what has waited there for more than 2,000 years. So the emperor remains beneath his mound, not forgotten, not fully revealed, held between history and restraint. Sometimes archaeology is not only the act of uncovering, sometimes it is the patience to leave a mystery sleeping. Near that sleeping tomb, one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in the world began with something ordinary. In 1974, farmers digging a well near Xi'an, China, uncovered pieces of pottery that led to the Terracotta Army. What emerged was not a small burial object, but thousands of life-sized soldiers, arranged in formation beneath the ground. They were made to accompany Qin Shi Huang into the afterlife, guarding an empire that was meant to continue beyond death. The discovery feels almost dreamlike because it began so simply. A tool striking earth, a fragment appearing in the dust. Then a hidden army slowly returning to view. The past often enters the present this way, not with a grand announcement, but through one small opening in the ground. The Terracotta Army is astonishing not only because of its size, but because of its variation. The soldiers are not all identical. Their faces, hairstyles, armor, posture, and ranks differ, giving the impression of a real army transformed into clay. Some stand as infantry, some are archers, some once held weapons, some appear calm, stern, watchful, or quietly alert. It is unlikely that every figure is a perfect portrait of one specific person, but the individuality still matters. The makers gave the army human detail. They turned mass production into something that feels personal, and that is what makes the soldiers so haunting. They are not alive. They never were. But standing together in silence, they seem to carry the memory of thousands of human faces. A silent army made for the afterlife reminds us that burial was rarely only about the body. Ancient burial goods show what people believed might continue after death. Food, jewelry, weapons, tools, clothing, vessels, charms, furniture, and small personal objects were often placed with the dead, not only as wealth, but as care. These things suggest that people imagined some kind of journey, need, protection, memory, or transformation beyond the final breath. A grave can reveal fear, but it can also reveal tenderness. Someone chose what to place there. Someone prepared the body. Someone believed the object still mattered. And through those offerings, we see that death was not always treated as an ending. Sometimes it was prepared for like a departure. And in some places, the departed did not become skeletons quickly. They remained with unsettling softness because the earth itself preserved them. Bog bodies are ancient human remains found in wetlands, especially in parts of northern Europe, where unusual chemical conditions slowed decay. The water, acidity, low oxygen, and plant material could preserve skin, hair, fingernails, clothing, and sometimes even facial expressions. This makes them strangely different from bones or dry mummies. They can feel close, too close almost. A face from thousands of years ago may still hold the shape of a person who once breathed, walked, feared, and was known. Many questions surround these individuals. Some may have been victims of violence, punishment, sacrifice, or ritual. The certainty varies from case to case, but their presence is powerful because time did not erase them in the usual way. It only made them quiet. And not all ancient resting places were left quiet for long. Some tombs were robbed by people who were already ancient to us. A burial sealed 3,000 years ago might have been opened only a few years, decades, or centuries after it was made. The robbers did not think of it as archaeology. To them, it was treasure, opportunity, danger, or desperation. This gives ancient history its own layers of age. A tomb may have been old to the person who broke into it, even though both the tomb builder and the robber now belong to the distant past. Gold could be taken. Doors could be forced. Sacred spaces could be disturbed. And yet, traces of those intrusions sometimes remain too. Broken seals, scattered objects, damaged walls, even violation becomes part of the history the tomb remembers. That is why a sealed tomb feels so different. A sealed tomb is not just a room underground, it is a pause in time. The air inside may have been still for centuries. The objects may remain close to where they were first placed. A cup, a bead, a painted wall, a wooden box, a folded cloth. Each thing waiting in the dark with no one there to use it. When such a place is opened, the feeling can be delicate. It is not only discovery, it is interruption. Archaeologists must move carefully because every position matters. Dust, fragments, footprints, and arrangements can all hold information. A sealed tomb preserves not only objects, but relationships between objects. What was near the body? What was near the door? What was meant to travel with the dead? A closed space can become a kind of frozen thought, and that thought belongs as much to the living as to the dead. The dead often tell us how the living understood the world. Burial is never only about death. It is about belief, family, status, grief, hope, fear, and the imagination of what might come next. A simple grave can speak of care. A rich tomb can speak of power. A shared burial can suggest kinship, violence, ritual, or community, depending on what the evidence allows. The dead cannot explain themselves directly, but the living arranged them. They chose the place, the objects, the posture, the ceremony, the words, the silence. And through those choices, we glimpse the emotional life of people who are otherwise gone. Every burial asks a quiet question. Not only who was this person, but what did the living believe they were sending into the dark? What people sent into the dark was not always a body. Sometimes it was an image. Cave paintings are among humanity's oldest surviving dreams, left on stone walls long before cities, kingdoms, or written histories. Animals, marks, hands, and mysterious shapes appear in deep chambers and sheltered rock faces, made with ochre, charcoal, minerals, and firelight. Many of these images show animals with astonishing care. Horses, bison, deer, lions, mammoths, and other creatures seem to move across the stone, as if the cave wall itself had become alive. No one can say with certainty what every image meant. They may have been memory, ritual, teaching, vision, story, or something else. But they show that even very early humans were not only surviving, they were imagining. And some of that imagination was carried far from the sun. Not all cave art was placed near the entrance where daylight could reach it. Some images were made deep underground, in narrow passages and hidden chambers where people had to carry lamps or torches into the dark. That choice matters. It means the art was not always casual decoration. To make it, people entered difficult spaces, brought light with them, and worked where shadows moved across uneven stone. The cave itself may have been part of the experience. Its silence, echo, darkness, and strange shapes could have made the images feel more powerful. We do not know exactly what those journeys meant, but it is easy to imagine the small flame, the careful steps, and the painted animal appearing slowly on the wall. A secret made visible only by fire. Among all the animals and signs, the handprints may be the most personal. A human hand pressed to stone or surrounded by blown pigment can feel almost impossibly close across time. There is no need to translate it, no need to know the person's name. The shape is already familiar. Fingers spread, palm open. A gesture made by someone who lived tens of thousands of years before us, and yet left behind something we instantly recognize. Scholars may debate what these hands meant. They could be signatures, rituals, group marks, memories, or acts of presence. But emotionally, they do something very simple. They tell us that someone was there, and the wall still holds the outline of that moment. Sometimes the ancient world is found not by experts searching carefully, but by accident. In 1940, near the village of Montignac in France, a group of teenagers discovered the cave of Lascaux after following their dog near an opening in the ground. What they found inside was extraordinary. Walls covered with painted animals, including horses, bulls, deer, and other figures, preserved in darkness for thousands of years. The discovery felt almost like the past opening a door. One ordinary day led into a hidden painted world. Lascaux later became one of the most famous prehistoric art sites on Earth, though the original cave had to be closed to protect it from damage. Its images remind us how fragile ancient beauty can be. Even our breath can change what silence preserved. Long before Lascaux was discovered, another cave had already been holding animals in darkness for an even longer time. Chauvet Cave in southern France contains some of the oldest known and most skillful cave art in the world. Its walls show lions, horses, rhinoceroses, bears, mammoths, and other animals drawn with remarkable movement and presence. Some seem to overlap, as if they are running together. Others appear to emerge from the natural curves of the rock. What makes Chauvet so powerful is not only its age, it is the confidence of the art. These were not simple marks made by people just beginning to see beauty. They were careful, expressive images made by hands that already understood line, motion, and form. Deep in the cave, the animals still seemed to breathe in the dark. When animals seem to breathe in the dark, it becomes difficult to call them only decoration. Some cave art may have been ritual, memory, teaching, vision, or story. No single explanation covers every cave, every image, or every mark. A painted bison in one place may have meant something different from a handprint in another. A cluster of dots may have carried a meaning that only certain people understood. The caves were not museums. They were living spaces of experience, entered with fire, sound, movement, and attention. Maybe some paintings helped people remember animals. Maybe some belonged to ceremonies. Maybe some were connected to dreams or altered states. The truth may not be one answer. It may be many human reasons, fading together on stone, and those reasons were made visible with materials taken from the earth itself. Ancient pigments came from the world around the artists. Ochre, charcoal, minerals, clay, and crushed stone could become red, black, yellow, brown, and white. Mixed with water, fat, or other binders, these materials turned into marks that could cling to cave walls for thousands of years. There is something beautiful in that. The earth became the image of the animals walking across it. A mineral became the curve of a horse's back. Charcoal became the dark line of a horn. Red ochre became a handprint, glowing softly against stone. These artists did not separate art from landscape. They used the ground beneath them to make memory visible above them. Not every mark in a cave is an animal. Some are lines, dots, grids, curves, and repeated shapes that may have carried meanings we can no longer fully recover. They might have been counting systems, symbolic signs, memory aids, teaching marks, ritual patterns, or something else entirely. To modern eyes, they can look simple, but simple does not mean meaningless. A few lines may have marked a season. A cluster of dots may have helped remember a story. A repeated shape may have belonged to a shared tradition understood by the people who made it. The difficulty is that the explanation has vanished while the sign remains. So the marks wait quietly beside the animals, small, careful traces of thought. The animals themselves show that ancient artists understood more than outline. They understood movement. In some caves, horses appear to run, bison seem to turn, lions move together, and rhinos lower their heads as if caught in the middle of motion. The artists used curves in the rock, repeated lines, shading, and overlapping forms to make still images feel alive. Sometimes the wall helped them. A bump in the stone could become a shoulder. A crack could suggest the edge of a body. Firelight may have made the figures shift and flicker as people moved through the cave. This was not flat decoration. It was art made with darkness, stone, flame, and memory all working together. And in that moving light, the painted animals may have seemed to wake. Long before books, before carved inscriptions, before cities covered the earth with walls and streets, humans were already reaching toward mystery with images. They placed hands on stone. They followed animals with lines. They carried pigments into darkness and made shapes where no daylight could easily find them. Art may be one of the oldest ways humans touched the unknown, not by explaining it completely, but by meeting it. A painted animal could be memory, prayer, teaching, dream, or all of these at once. A handprint could be a sign of presence, simple and lasting. Someone was here. Someone saw. Someone wondered. And the cave kept that wonder in darkness long after the fire went out. But not every ancient memory stayed on a wall. Some memories moved from mouth to mouth, changing each time they were told, until real fears, real disasters, and real landscapes became stories. Flood stories appear in many cultures around the world, especially in places where water could give life one season and take it away the next. This does not prove that every story came from one single event. Rivers flood in many places. Seas rise. Storms arrive suddenly. Whole landscapes can change when water breaks through the boundaries people trusted. To ancient communities, a great flood could feel like the world being remade. Fields vanished. Homes disappeared. The familiar ground became uncertain, and when people survived, they remembered. Over time, memory could become myth. Not a perfect record, but a shape given to fear, loss, and renewal. Water was not the only force powerful enough to become sacred memory. Some myths may preserve echoes of real disasters: a volcano darkening the sky, a tsunami crossing a shore, an earthquake opening the ground, a drought lasting too long, a comet burning silently overhead. Ancient people did not explain these events with modern science, but they noticed them with human intensity. They saw the sky change. They felt the earth move. They watched the sea behave in ways it was not supposed to behave. And then they told stories. A disaster could become a punishment, a warning, a battle between gods, or the memory of a world before the present one. The details might change as generations passed, but the feeling remained. The world had once become strange, and people had tried to remember why. One of the most famous stories of a lost world is Atlantis. Plato wrote about Atlantis more than 2,000 years ago, describing a powerful island civilization that fell out of balance and was destroyed. Many people have searched for Atlantis as if it must be a physical place waiting to be found. But it may matter more as a story than as a map. Atlantis can be read as a warning about pride, power, wealth, and the danger of a society forgetting its limits. That does not make it meaningless. It may make it more lasting. Some places disappear underwater, but some ideas sink even deeper into imagination. And Atlantis still rises there, again and again, whenever people wonder whether a civilization can be lost by forgetting how to be wise. Stories of lost worlds were not the only way ancient people explained strange evidence. Sometimes they found bones. Long before modern paleontology, people sometimes uncovered large fossils without knowing what they were. A giant skull, a huge tooth, or the bones of an animal no one had ever seen alive could invite powerful explanations. To ancient eyes, such remains may have suggested giants, dragons, monsters, heroes, or beasts from an earlier age. And in a way, they were not completely wrong. The bones really did belong to ancient creatures. The mistake was not in sensing that the world had once held stranger life. The mistake was only in the story built around it. A fossil is already a kind of myth written by the earth, a hard remnant of a creature that vanished before human memory began. And from bones, the imagination could easily grow wings, scales, and fire. Dragon stories may have many different roots. There is probably not one simple origin behind them. Some may have grown from snakes, crocodiles, lizards, or other dangerous animals. Some may have been shaped by fossils, where large bones seem to hint at creatures beyond ordinary life. Others may have borrowed their power from storms, volcanoes, fire, rivers, caves, or the fear of wild places. A dragon can be many things at once: a predator, a treasure guardian, a symbol of chaos, a sign of power, a memory of something half-seen and heavily imagined. That may be why dragon-like beings appear in so many different traditions, but never in exactly the same way. They belong to the edge between nature and story, where the real world becomes large enough to dream. When the real world becomes large enough to dream, even the sky can begin to feel like a story. Comets were once seen as omens because they appeared without warning, bright and strange against the familiar order of the night. Unlike the stars, they did not seem fixed. Unlike the moon, they did not return in an easy rhythm most people could recognize. They arrived like visitors, a pale flame, a tail of light, a mark across the dark. To ancient observers, this could feel deeply meaningful. A comet might be connected with the death of a ruler, the beginning of war, a coming disaster, or a message from powers beyond ordinary life. Today, we understand comets as icy bodies moving through space. But it is easy to understand why they once felt like the sky itself had spoken. And sometimes the sky did not only send a strange light, sometimes it took light away. Eclipses once turned daytime into mystery, changing the world in a way that could feel sudden and impossible. The sun dimmed, shadows sharpened, birds quieted. The air seemed to shift. Even cultures that learned to predict eclipses could still treat them with awe, because prediction does not remove emotion. Knowing that darkness will come is not the same as standing beneath it. To ancient people, an eclipse could suggest danger, disorder, divine anger, or a moment when the usual balance of the heavens had been disturbed. Modern science gives us the geometry of sun, moon, and earth. But the older feeling is not hard to imagine. For a few minutes, the day became uncertain. And uncertainty is one reason stories were needed. Myths are not useless simply because they are not literal. A story can be untrue in its details and still preserve something real in its feeling. It may carry a warning about pride, a memory of flood or fire, an explanation for a frightening sky, or a lesson about how people should live together. Ancient myths often mixed observation with imagination. They turned natural events into characters, disasters into moral lessons, and memory into something easier to carry. That does not make them failed science. It makes them human. People were trying to understand a world that could be beautiful, dangerous, generous, and terrifying all at once. A myth may not tell us exactly what happened, but it can tell us what mattered, and what mattered could travel very far. Ancient stories changed as they moved from one place to another. A tale could cross mountains with traders, sail across seas with travelers, pass through families, temples, markets, and firesides, and become slightly different each time it was told. Names changed. Places changed. A local river became a distant sea. A remembered king became a hero. A dangerous animal became a monster. A warning became a legend. This is why similar story patterns can appear in different cultures without being exactly the same. Stories are alive in that way. They borrow the shape of the people who carry them. And after centuries, it can be difficult to know where one version ended and another began. The story remains familiar, but its face keeps changing. And maybe that is what a myth is. A memory wearing a dream. Not memory as a perfect record, sealed and unchanged, but a memory softened by fear, hope, distance, and imagination. Something happens in the world. A flood, a comet, a strange bone, a darkened sun, a city lost to time. People remember it, but they also shape it. They give it meaning. They make it speak. And slowly, the event becomes larger than itself. It becomes a story people can carry when the original witnesses are gone. That is why ancient myths still feel powerful. They stand between fact and dream, between observation and longing. And at that edge, the ancient world leaves behind not only ruins and bones, but symbols that still glow faintly in the mind. Some ancient symbols glow in stories. Others survive as objects small enough to hold in the hand, but strange enough to unsettle every simple explanation. Roman dodecahedra are small bronze objects with 12 flat faces, each face pierced by a circular hole. Many have little knobs at their corners, and they have been found across parts of the former Roman world. Their purpose is still not confirmed. Some people have suggested they were measuring tools, candle holders, gaming pieces, ritual objects, or devices used in craftwork. The truth may be practical, symbolic, or something that changed from place to place. What makes them fascinating is their silence. They are carefully made, clearly intentional, and still waiting for the ordinary use that once made them obvious. A strange object becomes even stranger when its popular name may be misleading. The so-called Baghdad battery is often described as if it were an ancient electrical device, but that certainty goes too far. It was a clay jar containing a copper cylinder and an iron rod, found in the region of modern Iraq. In theory, objects like this could produce a small electric current if filled with the right liquid. But whether it was actually used that way is debated. It may have had a completely different purpose, perhaps connected to storage, ritual, or something we no longer recognize. The mystery is not proof of lost modern technology. It is a reminder that an object without clear context can collect many stories around it, and the careful answer is often quieter than the famous one. Some objects become mysterious because we cannot tell what they did. Others are mysterious because we can see what they were trying to show. The Nebra sky disk, found in Germany, is a bronze disk decorated with gold symbols that appear to represent the sun or full moon, a crescent moon, stars, and perhaps the Pleiades. It is one of the most striking ancient images of the heavens. The disk suggests that people in Bronze Age Europe were watching the sky with care, connecting celestial cycles to time, ritual, farming, or belief. Its exact use is still discussed, but its message feels clear in a broader sense. The sky mattered. People looked upward, noticed patterns, and placed those patterns into metal. A piece of night, carried in the hand. Light can change an object completely. The Lycurgus cup, made in the Roman world, appears green when lit from the front and reddish when light passes through it from behind. For a long time, this color change seemed almost magical. Modern analysis suggests the effect comes from tiny particles of gold and silver within the glass, interacting with light in a remarkable way. The ancient makers may not have understood the process in modern scientific terms, but they clearly knew how to create something extraordinary. That is often how ancient technology works. Not as theory written in textbooks, but as craft knowledge held in hands, workshops, and repeated practice. The cup changes with the light, and with it, our idea of ancient skill changes too. Not every carved object is proof of the dream we want it to prove. The Saqqara bird, found in Egypt, is a small wooden figure shaped like a bird, with outstretched wings and a tail. Because of its form, some people have suggested it might show ancient knowledge of flight. But that claim should be treated carefully. It may have been a toy, a ritual object, a bird model, a decorative piece, or something connected to symbolism we do not fully understand. Its shape is interesting, but interest is not the same as certainty. Ancient objects often invite imagination because they are incomplete. We see the form, but not the full setting. We see the wings, but not the meaning. And so the bird remains suspended between artifact and idea. Not every small object stays mysterious because it is strange. Sometimes it becomes important because it is clear. Ancient coins can preserve the names and faces of rulers who might otherwise be almost forgotten. A small piece of metal can carry a portrait, a title, a symbol, a city, or a claim of power stamped into its surface. Coins traveled through hands, markets, roads, ports, and pockets. They moved farther than many monuments. And because they were made in numbers, they could survive where palaces, records, and statues did not. A kingdom may vanish from memory. A ruler's tomb may be lost, but a coin can remain, small and worn, still holding the shape of a face that once meant authority. And even a clear face can become uncertain when its world is missing. Some artifacts are mysterious because their context is gone. An object found carefully inside a tomb can be understood differently from the same object found loose in a market, far from the place where it was first buried, used, or displayed. Context tells archaeologists what surrounded the object, who might have owned it, whether it was ordinary or sacred, whether it belonged to daily life, trade, ritual, burial, or repair. Without that setting, meaning becomes harder to recover. A carved figure may be a toy, a god, a charm, or a decoration. A cup may be for drinking, offering, measuring, or remembering. The object itself remains visible, but the world that explained it has stepped away. And sometimes the world returns through damage. A broken object can tell more than a perfect one. A crack may show how something failed. A repair may show that it was valued enough to keep. Worn edges may reveal where hands held it again and again. Burn marks, scratches, patches, missing pieces, and reused fragments can all become small records of human contact. Perfection can be beautiful, but damage is often more intimate. It shows use. It shows accident. It shows that the object had a life before it became an artifact. A flawless vessel might tell us how something was made, but a mended vessel can tell us that someone wanted it to continue, and in that repair, there is a quiet trace of care. Many museum objects carry that kind of silence. They sit behind glass with labels that name their material, date, and place, but not always their full story. Bronze figure, clay vessel, stone weight, wooden comb, gold ornament. The label can tell us what the object is, but not always who touched it, who lost it, who treasured it, or what it meant in the private hours of an ordinary life. Museums are full of things that survived without their voices. Some were sacred, some were useful. Some were probably so ordinary that no one at the time would have thought them mysterious at all. But once the world around them disappears, even ordinary things begin to glow with questions. A key without its door, a cup without its hand, a charm without its whispered wish. That may be why the strangest artifacts are often ordinary things we no longer understand. A small token, a tool, a weight, a gaming piece, a child's toy, or household charm can become deeply mysterious when the habits around it are gone. The object has not changed. We have. We no longer know the gesture that used it, the rule that explained it, the joke that surrounded it, or the need that made it obvious. This is one of archaeology's gentler lessons. The past was not only made of temples, kings, battles, and tombs, it was also made of small things used without thinking. And sometimes, the most mysterious object is simply an ordinary life, seen from too far away. An ordinary life, seen from far away, does not stay in one room. It walks roads. Roman roads connected an empire by turning distance into something more manageable. Built from layers of stone, gravel, sand, and packed earth, they carried soldiers, traders, officials, letters, tools, food, taxes, stories, and ideas across enormous stretches of land. A road can seem less mysterious than a temple, but it changes everything. It decides how fast news travels, how armies move, how markets grow, and how distant places begin to feel connected. Some Roman roads still survive in fragments today, worn but recognizable. They remind us that power is not only built upward in monuments. Sometimes it is laid quietly across the ground. And where roads carried people across land, aqueducts carried something even more necessary: water. Roman aqueducts moved water across long distances using gravity and careful engineering. Their channels had to slope gently enough for water to keep flowing, but not so steeply that it rushed out of control. This required patient measurement over valleys, hills, and uneven ground. Some aqueducts ran underground. Others crossed landscapes on arches that still look graceful today. The strange beauty of them is that their power was quiet. No engine pushed the water forward. No modern pump forced it through the city. It simply moved because the builders understood levels, pressure, distance, and flow. A whole city could depend on a slope so slight the eye might barely notice it. The Romans joined places with roads and water, but they were not the only people to bind difficult landscapes together. The Inca road system crossed mountains, deserts, valleys, and high plateaus, holding a vast empire together without modern vehicles or wheeled transport. Runners carried messages along the routes. Storehouses supported movement. Bridges crossed deep gorges. Stone paths climbed through air so thin that travel itself became an act of endurance. The roads were not just practical. They were part of administration, military control, communication, ceremony, and memory. In a world of steep mountains and scattered communities, connection required astonishing effort. The Inca did not flatten the landscape. They learned how to move through it, and their roads still suggest an empire stitched carefully across the spine of the Andes. That same patience appears in Inca stone walls. Their blocks are often irregular, with many angles and uneven shapes, yet they fit together with remarkable precision. In places like Cusco, the joints can be so tight that a thin blade can barely pass between the stones. The mystery is not that the Inca had secret machines. It is that they had skill, time, experience, and a deep understanding of stone. Each block had to be shaped to meet the stones around it. The walls could also handle earthquakes better than more rigid construction, because the stones could settle and shift without easily collapsing. There is something calming about that kind of craftsmanship. No straight sameness, no hurried shortcut, just one stone meeting another, carefully until the wall became stronger than its parts. And stone, again and again, brings us back to Egypt. Ancient Egyptians moved heavy blocks using methods that were practical, difficult, and still impressive. They used sledges, ropes, ramps, boats on the Nile, organized labor, and careful planning. In some scenes, workers are shown hauling large statues while someone pours liquid in front of the sledge, likely to reduce friction on the ground. These explanations do not make the work feel ordinary. They make it feel more human. The mystery is not whether a block could move. It is how many people, tools, decisions, meals, measurements, and repeated efforts were needed to move it. A stone travels slowly. A monument rises slowly. And behind every massive block is not one miracle, but thousands of ordinary actions, aligned toward one extraordinary goal. A monument rises slowly, but so can a city. And often, what decides whether a city can grow is not stone, but water. Ancient canals changed the fate of many places by guiding rivers, draining fields, feeding crops, and linking settlements to trade. A channel cut through earth could turn dry land into farmland, or make a city powerful enough to feed thousands. But water management also made cities vulnerable. A canal could fill with silt. A flood could break its banks. A river could shift away. A system that once created abundance could become difficult to maintain. That is the quiet truth of ancient engineering. It did not only build civilization, it had to keep caring for it season after season. Some ancient landscapes were shaped not by one city alone, but by the spaces between them. At Chaco Canyon, in what is now New Mexico, ancient Puebloan builders created a remarkable world of great houses, roads, alignments, and ritual spaces. The buildings were carefully planned, with walls, rooms, and sight lines that suggest attention to both landscape and sky. Roads stretched outward across the desert, sometimes in strikingly straight lines, connecting Chaco to a wider region. The full meaning of this network is still debated. It may have involved ceremony, trade, pilgrimage, astronomy, politics, or all of these together. But what remains is the feeling of a landscape made intentional. Not only a place to live, a place to move through, return to, and remember. In dry lands, memory often gathers around water. Desert civilizations stored it like treasure, because life depended on every hidden reserve. Cisterns, wells, channels, reservoirs, and underground systems helped people survive where rain was rare or unreliable. A city in a dry place could not exist by hope alone. It needed planning, maintenance, and a careful understanding of land. Water had to be collected when it came, protected when it stayed, shared when it was needed. That makes ancient water systems feel especially human. They were not built for display alone. They were built for thirst, crops, animals, washing, cooking, and survival. In the desert, engineering was not separate from daily life. It was the difference between a settlement and silence, and the work of keeping life possible often lasted longer than one generation. Many ancient engineering projects were too large to belong to a single lifetime. A road system, a canal network, a temple complex, a pyramid field, a city wall, or a sacred landscape could begin under one group of hands and continue under another. The people who started the work might never see it finished. The people who finished it might inherit plans, rituals, tools, and meanings from those who came before. That changes how these monuments feel. They were not only acts of construction, they were acts of trust. A generation placed effort into something that would outlive it, believing that someone else would continue, repair, honor, or understand it. Ancient engineering often required more than skill. It required continuity, a promise made in stone, water, road, and labor. And perhaps that promise is where the deepest ancient mystery rests. Not in impossible machines, not in secret powers, not in the idea that ancient people were beyond understanding, but in their patience. Again and again, the ancient world shows us people watching the sky, shaping stone, guiding water, painting darkness, tying memory into cords, carving names into walls, and building for meanings that reached beyond their own lives. They were not so different from us. They were tired, hopeful, afraid, curious, practical, symbolic, and endlessly imaginative. And maybe that is why their traces still move us. The ancient world is strange not because it was inhuman, but because it was deeply human. And some parts of being human have always been older than we know. And now, as these old mysteries begin to soften, you do not need to hold on to any of them. The stones can remain where they are. The unread symbols can keep their silence. The desert lines can stretch quietly beneath the stars. The sealed tombs can rest in darkness. The lost cities can sleep beneath sand, forest, mountain mist, and time. Tonight, we have wandered through the ancient world, through places built before memory was written clearly, through machines made for the sky, through stones moved by hands we will never know, through caves where firelight once touched painted animals, and through stories that may have carried fragments of fear, wonder, and truth across thousands of years. Some questions have answers, some have partial answers, and some remain open, not because they need to be solved tonight, but because mystery itself can be a quiet place to rest. So let the details fade now. You do not need to remember the names, the dates, the ruins, or the theories. Let them drift away like dust in a beam of moonlight. Maybe somewhere, far from this room, old stones are cooling under the night sky. Maybe an unread symbol is waiting in silence. Maybe a buried wall still holds the shape of a forgotten street. And maybe that is enough for now. Let your breathing slow. Let your body become heavy. Let the ancient world grow distant and soft. And if sleep is already close, you can follow it gently, without thinking, without trying, without needing to know what comes next. The mysteries will still be here another night. For now, rest and keep drifting.